Emotional content is filmed on Whadjuk Noongar land. This podcast acknowledges the traditional owners and custodians of country. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. This episode contains discussions of sexual assault, drug use and other life-challenging experiences that may be distressing to some listeners. Please take care when listening. For immediate support, contact 1800-RESPECT on 1800 737 732. Additional resources are available on our website at emotionalcontent.com.au. Come for the stories, stay for the connection. I'm your host, Amy Jane Brand, and this is your weekly dose of emotional content. This is definitely another story that I'm really nervous to talk about. Fun fact, my family doesn't even know about this, so I think that's what makes it even more scary. Some of my friends know, but most of them don't know why I stopped. It's just something that, has come up in conversation about something that I did do at one point in my life. And I've never really delved too far into detail as to, what went on and what happened and why I stopped. So if you told me that I was going to be talking about this publicly or even telling my family about 5 years ago, I would not have believed you. So hopefully this can help some of you. But I'll give you a backstory as to what was going on at the time. I was about 22 years old, going on 23. I had just had my first boob job. And if you listen to the previous episodes, you'll know all about that. And I had just ended a relationship that I was in for a long time when I was younger. During that time, I really hadn't done any work on myself in regards to grieving my father, who I lost at 13, in a pretty horrible way. And I spent a lot of time in Perth really hating the place. I love it now. I'm living here now. I'm pretty sure it feels permanent that I'm going to be in Perth now for probably the rest of my life. But at the time, I was still really grieving my dad, and the trauma of losing him was just all in Perth. Perth was just the memory of that, and it was a place I didn't want to be in anymore. I never fully felt like I fitted in either. I was always kind of outside of the glass box. I definitely still feel like there's a bit of a glass box here in Perth, but back then it was really bad. Even when I had just got my boobs done, I remember being at house parties and I'd have mothers turn up and say something to me and basically bully me that I had had plastic surgery, just because it wasn't the norm then. It started happening, but it really wasn't that normal, and I was definitely one of the first within my friend group to get it done, and it just seemed to be a hot topic. So it's kind of like the East Coast was very different. So I wanted to be in a place where I wasn't going to have mothers trying to give me a hard time at house parties. The main reason that I wanted to leave Perth is because I was abusing drugs and alcohol really heavily. I was spending every single weekend, and if there was a weekday, doing some kind of drugs or getting really drunk. That was my form of escaping from not dealing with the trauma of losing my dad, and I was getting into a really bad place with it. Every time I was having a come down, I was getting more and more suicidal, and it just felt like I was very much on the brink of doing something really stupid or overdosing, or I wasn't in a good place, and I knew that. And I felt like I wasn't going to have a very good chance at stopping the drug abuse with the people I was hanging around. I will do another episode and I'd dive into this further, but I did have a rule for myself that I was never going to, buy the drugs, the harder drugs. I was never going to purchase them myself. If they were there, I'd have them. If they were offered, I'd have them. So that was kind of my scale of what I will do and what I won't do. And unfortunately, the offers really never stopped with the people I was around. So it was just becoming more and more dangerous at that time for me to stay in Perth. But when I did announce that I was leaving, I definitely had some pretty shitty attitudes from people about it. They did not really think that it was going to last very long. And I remember specifically one person turning around and being like, "Oh, you'll be back." And in that moment, I just thought, there's no fucking way I am coming back to this hellhole. So that was something that really stuck with me. I had this idea that I was going to make a full-time living being a glamour model. glamour modeling, I think the ambition and drive that I had to be a glamour model definitely saved me in a way. It took me outside of Perth, outside of the toxic environment that I was situated in at the time, and it made me want bigger things for myself. So that's what really took me over to the East Coast. I sold my car. I ended things with my ex, and yeah, I went to the East Coast. I went over there once before actually moving. I went over for a holiday. I did some shoots and I was like, yeah, this is the place where I want to live. And then I ended up moving back again. But during that first visit, I made a couple of friends and I moved in with them. And they were also modelling at the time too. And we all kind of just had the idea that we would make a full-time living, off of doing swimwear shoots and magazine covers and things like that. I was very quickly going through the money for my car and what I had in my bank account, and I was realising that unfortunately the dream that I had was not going to be very sustainable money-wise. And one of the girls that I had met there, she was actually a topless waitress. And it's definitely not something that I had ever considered. I definitely didn't think that I would ever try sex work, but yeah, it was different on the Gold Coast compared to Perth. Like, I feel everyone was very judgmental back then, especially around sex work, or if you were doing anything different to the average dickhead at the time, you were just going to be given a really hard time about it. So yeah, I never saw myself doing it, but the girls were coming back with lots of cash, man. Like, and I needed the cash, and I was just like, shit, I'm so much more comfortable here in the Gold Coast, and like, I'm not going to go back to Perth. I would so rather, do this line of work and feel empowered and be able to look after myself and not have to go back there where I'm probably going to get on drugs again. I might do some serious harm to myself. To be honest, I don't know whether I would be around today if I didn't make the move over to the Gold Coast. Everything just felt so much more aligned with me. You could wear what you wanted. There was just like so much less judgment. And it's especially felt like that at the time, going from small town mentality Perth over to the East Coast. It was like a very bold move and it was very different. At this time, I also started dating a DJ, and he had dated other strippers and sex workers in the past. So it was like not even really much of a conversation. It was just like, oh, cool, you want to do that? Like, it was very much not the reaction that I had expected. My previous boyfriends probably would have had a fit if I said that I was going to be doing that line of work. So everything just felt like it really was flowing pretty easily. There was no real judgment, issues, nothing. And yeah, that's when I kind of decided, well, I feel supported by everyone that's around me at the moment, so why not give it a go? It was definitely something that I was going to keep quiet from my mum and my family. I think I had definitely put them through enough when it came to all the shit I was getting up to in, back home. So I kept it quiet right up until now. Still terrifying. Oh my gosh. So I ended up joining my friend's agency. Obviously, I'm pretty sure, look, things could be different now, but we had agencies that we worked with. I worked with a couple. I posted some unpublished modelling photos on the websites with my face blurred, and what I would say stage name was Pamela. I was, and I still am, totally obsessed with Pamela Anderson. So it was like, a little thing for her. Obviously, every single job I worked, though, it was pretty obvious my name wasn't actually Pamela, but I loved it. It was like my alter ego at the time. And back then it felt really empowering and like cool. It's like you just like go out for work that night and you're putting on a completely different mask. And there were definitely some pros to the job, but for me personally, there was definitely more cons. The stigma around sex work at that time was completely different to what it is now. Like, there was no OnlyFans. Most of the girls were totally keeping that identity under wraps unless you were, a stripper at one of the clubs and you were going and doing like private shows and stuff. Obviously, you had your identity open. But when it came to topless waitressing and nude waitressing and stuff, everyone was keeping it very hush-hush. It was not something that we could openly feel empowered about. I mean, obviously, some girls were open about it, but it was very different back then compared to what it is now. I felt really ashamed at the time of the thought of anyone back in Perth knowing what I was doing, not just from a family perspective, because I understand them feeling concerned about my safety. I don't think that they would judge me for doing that kind of work. It was more, is it safe? But when it comes to the judgment of people back from where I was living or who I was hanging out with at the time, like it would have been the hot topic for like a year. So very different to what it is now. Thankfully, times are, changing. I set myself a couple of rules going into this line of work. It was just something that, I kind of told myself. It was not a discussion I had with anyone else. It was a way that I tried to minimize the danger of the job, which I still at this point didn't fully know what I was walking into. However, I did try and set some rules for myself, one of them being no lap dances around people or privately. I just never felt fully comfortable about that, especially going into a private room with a dude, locking the door at a bucks do. That always felt really dangerous to me. And, I did hear things of girls getting potentially assaulted in those situations. And it never aligned with me. So I never did it. I also refused any bikie house bookings. I think that speaks for itself. My other rule was not to stay back past my booking time. So if I wasn't being paid, I wasn't going to be there. Even if I was having a great time with these people, it just felt unprofessional for me to stay, and then they would potentially get the wrong idea. So for me personally, that's a rule I did for myself. Also, you could be the most fun in the world, but that line of work, it's like pay me or fuck off. So that's something that I wasn't going to be doing either. When I look back, I definitely would say I was not the best worker for the job. I never wanted to serve drinks. I know it's part of like topless waitressing. It's like, get the guys the drinks, take the cap off the beer, give them a fresh beer, blah, blah, blah. I never felt like doing that. I kind of just waltzed in, and maybe it's because I wasn't really taking the work too seriously, but I think I definitely pissed some girls off during my time working, more because I just wouldn't really pull my weight when it came to serving drinks. I was pretty much in my head just thinking, well, these men are paying for beautiful women to be, naked around them and to be mingling and just, be there. Why should we have to go and get their fucking drinks? They can get their own drinks. So that was the attitude I had around it. I think a couple of girls complained because I don't know. I wasn't even really asked to go and get drinks. I just wanted to stand there, look pretty and have some drinks and leave. That's how I felt. And I felt like all the girls should just be doing that. You know what I mean? Like everyone was stunning. So no, don't get their drinks for them. Just stand there and be stunning. Some jobs are really cool. Before I dive into the darker side of the job, I definitely have to say that there were times that it was a really fun line of work. You get to work your own hours, you feel empowered making your own money, you can support yourself. It's usually in more luxury settings, not always, but it leans more into that more luxury side of work, I guess you would say. But there's times when it's not luxurious at all. There's definitely a downside to the job. And I'm going to talk about my personal downsides. This might not be everybody's, but for me personally, this is what I experienced. I did not appreciate, look, this might have changed as well, but back then the agencies didn't give a shit how many girls versus guys there was. So the ratio could be ridiculous. Like there was definitely times where it was just 2 of us girls and 30 men on a fucking charter boat. And honestly, it feels so dangerous. Like I can't really, if you haven't done this line of work ever before, I can't tell you how scary it actually is being topless or upgrading to nude, which is what we did often with that many intoxicated men. It's hard work. It's scary work, and you kind of don't really know until you're in there doing it. They don't really tell you that. The agency doesn't really disclose that side of it. I think they should. I think they should be more realistic about it, because if you've got somebody kind of telling you, oh, it's great work, it's easy work, you'll love it, it's so much fun, the guys are so respectful, and then you walk into something like that, it would just be a fucking shock and a half. And I have a thick skin. I would say I'm more street smart than book smart, and I still got quite a fucking shock a few times. I'll never forget. Oh my God. I'll never forget this particular time. I was with this other chick. I had not met her before, but we both rocked up to, I'm pretty sure it was around Southport. It was like off of one of the little beach jetty things there. Anyway, she rocked up and we're like, oh yeah, we're doing the same job, same agency, whatever. Had our little bags with us ready to be picked up for this boat. And obviously we didn't get told like what boat it was or anything like that. It was a boat job. Sometimes they're really luxurious. Other times they are fucking not. We got picked up on this little dinghy. Keep in mind, there's people watching on the beach. What are these girls doing all dolled up, getting onto a fucking dinghy boat, like not dressed for any kind of boating whatsoever. And then we got onto this luxury yacht and I was like, oh my God, this is stunning, perfect. These dudes are really nice. Like they weren't being seedy at all. They obviously had money. And when you're working that kind of job, you're like, sweet, they've got money. Anyway, we ended up getting a phone call, an aggressive phone call from the agency being like, you're on the wrong boat. They've called up and they're complaining, blah, blah, blah. And then we turn around and there's this fucking charter boat. It's like a fishing boat with 30 men on it, and that's the boat we're supposed to be on. I started having almost a panic attack about it because it was like the first time I'd ever been on this kind of boat with that many dudes versus this minimal amount of women working, me and one chick. And I looked at her and I was like, I do not want to get on that boat. She was like, neither do I. And I was just like, oh my God, what the fuck do we do? Anyway, the agency said that we're going to be pulled from working with them again if we don't get onto that boat. And this agency in particular, because all the girls were with a few, was getting us the most work. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm going to have to fucking do this. And the worst part is the dude knew what was happening and he was like, oh, you're not the girls. And he was like, well, we'll pay you. If you want to work with us, we'll pay you like privately for, so we wouldn't even have to take an agency fee out of it. And I'm just like, oh mate, please don't tell me that. Anyway, we ended up doing like the dinghy of shame. All these people were watching off the beach. We had to get off of this boat and then go and get on the other one. And they were screaming like fucking baboons. It was one of the worst jobs I'd ever worked, other than, the time that I stopped. I'll get into that soon. But this in particular was really fucking hard work. It was not nice. Absolutely did not upgrade to nude on that job. I avoided that at all costs. Hats off to the other chick because she did, but I just could not handle it. It was hardcore. It was not a fun job, and a lot of jobs are like that. So keep that in mind if that's something you're thinking about doing. You might end up on a fucking charter boat, and it smelled like fucking fish. Like 30 dudes, I just can't. Anyway. Obviously, I was dating that guy I was telling you about, and he did mention to me that his ex-girlfriend was a stripper. And I was like, okay, thinking that she worked in a strip club or something like that. Obviously, I had stalked her because, like, you're always probably going to stalk the ex and find out who they are. But I didn't ever realize that I was going to turn up to a job and she would be working as well. So I just started dating this guy like a few months in, and I had to work a job with 12 other girls. It was a really big house party, and I had to stand around naked next to his ex-girlfriend and be civil, which was kind of hard because I could feel like her and her girlfriends were being pretty bitchy towards me. And then at the end of the night, she and her friends, look, this never happened on any other job, but I'm pretty fucking sure it was her and her mates, decided, because all the girls would put their bags into one room and you'd think it would be safe because, like, we have to keep our money in there as well. We get paid before we start, put it in our bags, and then we go and work. That's how it worked then. Pretty sure that's how it would work now. Anyway, I was finishing up and those girls went in before and my clothes were miraculously missing. My clothes were gone. I had to walk up to one of the dudes there and ask if I could borrow a fucking t-shirt to go home. So well done to them girls. That's fucking hilarious. It wasn't at the time. I was fucking pissed and they had already left by the time I realised what was going on. So I could not confront them about that. The other thing at that job, that one sticks in my head. I mean, obviously, you know why, but that in particular was a pretty weird experience. I had the owner of the house and he was throwing the whole party in front of everyone, was trying to like barter with me for a lap dance, a private lap dance in another room, and he got up to $10,000, and I just continued to say no. I needed the money too, so I have to say that was a more difficult no, but I still stuck to my guns at that one. I think when someone is that persistent, I don't know, there's something about that just feels even worse. Like, what are your intentions? I'm really sus on dudes, and I lost so much trust for men working that job as well. Like, you see a different side to men, and it will affect your relationships I'm pretty sure when you do any kind of sex work, like, you just feel sus as fuck on them. Another job that was like a yearly event was working the Gold Coast 500. If you don't know what it is, it's like, I'm pretty sure it's just like the supercars. And yeah, it's like racing through Surfers Paradise. There was always like promo girls for Monster and Red Bull and stuff like that. And then there was like all the work that you don't know this is going on for the Gold Coast 500. But when the Gold Coast 500 is on, it is like, well, it was back then. I'm guessing it is now, but it was the biggest like stripper event or topless waitress sex work event ever. Like, I didn't know about it. And then the girls were like, oh, the Gold Coast 500 is coming up. And I was like, what the fuck is that about? Anyway, you get absolutely slammed back to back with bookings. There's all of these high-rise buildings that they drive around and they block it all off. And guys book all of the fucking hotels to stay in and watch off the balcony. Like, it's a full thing. It's like the baboons get together. That's really rude, but it's like they all get together and they hire topless waitresses and stuff to serve them drinks, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of money to be made. And I made thousands that weekend. I don't remember exactly how much because, look, it was a long time ago, but we made a killing. And yeah, I remember all of us girls were just stoked afterwards. It was fucking good money. But you have to be really careful on the balconies, and no one actually told me that. There's a lot of guys that take like really high-powered cameras to take photos of the cars. So they've got really long lenses and they can zoom up on fucking everything. And I didn't realize at the time, but if you wanted to keep your identity, under wraps, then you probably don't want to go stand out on the balconies topless or naked. I never got the heads up on that one. And unfortunately, I was standing out on the balcony. There's actually a photo of it, but I was standing out on the balcony, butt naked, with a pair of sunnies on, some knee-high boots, and I'm pretty sure I was drinking a UDL. Anyway, I went from that job to the next job, and this dude was there, and he was sitting at like the balcony, like fully with his tripod and stuff. Anyway, he came inside and was on his laptop, and he was like, "Oh, I just took a photo of you while you were working." And I honestly had like an internal meltdown, like an internal crisis was happening. I was sent into fucking orbit in that moment. I had a literal meltdown. Anyway, he showed me the photo. I made him show me the photo. And it's just me standing on the balcony, holding my drink, boots on, sunnies on. And there's like 5 dudes around me that are staring at me, not the cars. And one dude is standing behind me, taking a photo of my butt with his phone. I made this guy delete the photos, like trash those photos, but I took a photo of it before he got rid of them permanently. But I do still have the photo. It's funny to laugh at now. It's quite iconic, but at the time, fuck, I was so annoyed at myself because I really wanted to keep it under wraps. But yeah, it didn't end up going anywhere. And to be honest, because I hadn't had my nose done yet and my boobs looked pretty different and I didn't have certain tattoos, you probably wouldn't be able to tell that it was me. But at the time I was shitting myself. Now I'm going to tell you why I stopped. So this part is a little bit more difficult for me. So the last ever job that I worked was in Surfers Paradise. It was at the Soul Hotel, which is the really tall one right on the beach. It was a booking of about 20 guys with 2 girls, me and another girl. I didn't know her, hadn't met her before. And yeah, she wasn't particularly friendly, unfortunately. Like, not every person is going to be friendly on the job. I liked to make friends with the girls very quickly and stick together just as like, as a safety thing for both of us. I just feel like that was something that I always tried to do so we could look out for each other. But it's not always the way. Some people are just there to make their money, not friends. There was one guy in particular at this job, and the whole night he was kind of giving me a hard time. It was subtle but like obvious for me to notice, just constantly staring, always trying to say something, kind of seedy, just being really aggressive with the way he was staring at me the whole time. It felt like he was on some kind of really hard drugs, like he was just not taking his eyes off of me, always had to be in the same room that I was in, and I was picking up on some pretty negative energy from that dude. I really didn't feel comfortable most of the time. I actually made a couple of comments to the nicer guys that were there. And I said, I'm feeling quite uncomfortable. Your friend just doesn't seem to want to leave me alone. And I think they had words with him, but it didn't stop. So that made it more frustrating for me. This booking was booked as nude, not just topless. So I knew that walking into it. Obviously, when I first started, I didn't know that I was going to be having this issue with this guy. But yeah, as the night progressed on, he got worse and worse. So I didn't feel comfortable being full nude at this job. I'd usually only go to jobs and then upgrade afterwards. But, I felt I was almost 6 months into doing this kind of work, and I felt fairly confident at that time. So I didn't think too much of it when I went into that booking. Once I had finished this job, I got my bag from the spare room and I went into the bathroom connected to that spare room, and I started getting myself together. As soon as I was finished, I was ready to leave. I started getting dressed and the music was really loud. They usually always are. Again, something that you don't think about at the time. But this guy got into the bathroom that I had locked. It was, I am permanently traumatized about these fucking locks. The ones with the little pin that you push in, that really pathetic little pin in the bathrooms that never feels like it's fully locked, and half the time they don't. That little pin lock was what I had between me and this guy. And of course, he managed to get it open. And I was half naked still. I had my underwear on at this point, but this guy ended up getting into the room and immediately attacked me. This is the part that I have not told many people at all. Once he got into the room, he grabbed me and he smashed my head right up against the mirror and kept my head there with his forearm and started undoing his pants. At that point, he only had one arm on me because he needed his other hand to undo his pants. And I thank my brothers so much for this, because they taught me how to throw a punch when I was younger, which has saved me multiple times in my life. And I remember my brother always saying, if you have to use your elbow because it's the strongest part. And in that moment, I turned around with as much force as I could and I elbowed him in the nose. I was covered in his blood from his nose breaking on my elbow. And in that moment, once I had done that, I grabbed my bag. I was half naked. I was literally wearing a G-string, boobs out, grabbed my bag and sprinted what felt like as fast as I ever have in my life. I was scared even just leaving that other girl there. I mean, she wasn't nice with me. She was busy. She seemed fine, but it was like I had to just get out of there as quick as possible. I ran straight to the elevator and that was being way too slow. Obviously, those high-rise buildings, they take fucking forever. And I ended up hearing the dudes start coming out and basically saying, get her. There was multiple. I didn't see exactly how many were coming because I could just hear them. So I started running. I ran for what felt like, I don't know, it felt like forever that I was running. I found the stairwell. They were coming after me and I started sprinting down the stairwell with my bag and my phone. I couldn't even get my phone out. I didn't even know who I was going to call at the time, but I just sprinted. And as I was running, I got a fair amount ahead of them and I ended up seeing this housekeeper there, and the housekeeper stopped and took me to a room which kept me safe. And that housekeeper, it was like a cleaning closet, and we were in there until we heard the dudes go past. But I truly didn't know the kind of danger that I was facing with that job until I was running for my life. I honestly felt like I was running for my life in that moment. I felt like I was going to get gang raped. I don't know whether they were going to just physically attack me, like beat me up because I hurt their friend, or whether they were going to sexually assault me as well. It was one of the most terrifying moments in my life for sure. And it's something that I've really blocked out as well. Yeah, it really rattled me, the whole thing. And honestly, that housekeeper saved my fucking life. Like, I honestly don't know what would have happened if I didn't get her help. I don't know how long I could have run down those stairs for. It was a really terrifying time. And I, in my head, was thinking, I've got to get to the front desk and just run out and just be fucking half naked and just get safety. Like, these dudes won't be able to touch me if I'm at the front desk around what they would have security there. Anyway, I almost made it 6 months in that job, and after that I quit. That was the last time I ever did that line of work again. I told my agency what had happened, and, you know, they were a group of men that came over for a bucks do from Sydney. And yeah, she said the most that she can do is be able to blacklist the guy who booked it from the agency permanently. That's the most she said she could do, which to me was not fucking good enough at all. I was really shocked with how the agency dealt with it, and it made me realise that there's so little protection for topless waitresses in particular, that when a situation like that happens, nobody's going to protect you. Like, maybe if there was more girls on the bookings, you know, like, that would have been more incentive for someone not to do that, because it was like, you know, the ratio was different. I don't know. There wasn't enough protection at all. There was no offers to make a police report. And at the time as well, with everything being so secretive, I didn't know if I could go to the police about it. Like, you know, people are so quick to blame the women, and I just felt like it was really out of my control. I mean, even telling my boyfriend what had happened at the time, it was like, yeah, he was like, you're stopping immediately. I already knew I was stopping. It was a complete no for me after that. And, you know, I just, things ended up picking up with Instagram not long after that. So I was getting a little more jobs here and there, and, you know, stuff started to change. I ended up being supported by my boyfriend at the time for a while until that happened. But, you know, lucky I was fortunate enough for that to be a possibility. But it was shocking to him and myself what had happened, and I don't think anyone really knew the dangers of it until, you know, that was my experience. There's a lot of things I learned from doing sex work. One of them is, as I said before, topless waitressing, you don't have protection. If it's something that you're considering doing, like, yeah, it's great money. I don't know what it's like now, you know, with the economy and since COVID and stuff like that, if things have changed. I have to say that for me personally, I feel like it is way more dangerous than stripping in a club. It's way more dangerous than coming and doing like private shows, because the girls that come in and do the private shows at the bucks do's and, you know, events and stuff, they always have a driver / bodyguard. So guys don't fuck around with the girls doing the shows. And when they were there for a moment, I felt more protected because there was this like dude around that was going to protect the woman he's working for, and potentially us. But they're only there for what, 45 minutes to an hour, and that's it. It's back to us having to fend for ourselves again. And I just feel like it's fucking terrifying. And I don't think it has changed now. I don't think agencies are offering some kind of protection, or I don't know. I don't think that will ever change, or if it ever will be a priority for waitresses to be protected in that regard. Maybe it just comes with the job, but I don't think it should. And, you know, I feel like women are so quick to judge other women doing sex work, even with times like now, which tends to glamorize it a lot. I think people in general need to understand that the sex workers coming to bucks nights, if they're going to be around your partner, you need to not be worrying about the sex workers. It's a very small amount of sex workers that are interested in going there to hook up with your husband. It is more along the lines of your soon-to-be husband or your boyfriend that is going to do something dodgy, because I'm telling you right now, it was always them making moves. It was always them forcing themselves upon sex workers. It was never sex workers going there specifically to hook up. They were going there to get their bag and fucking leave. Like, the judgment towards sex workers is just so disgusting. Like, I know things have gotten a lot better now, but it's still just outrageous how much, you know, people, especially women, hating on women. They just hate other strippers. This kind of work definitely made me not trust men easily. I already didn't trust men from my own experiences. I'm in a much better position with it now. Like, I do trust my partner, and I feel like my relationship towards the masculine has really changed for the better now. But it was years of, I felt like it really damaged the way that I viewed men, and it made a deep-seated, like, I did not like men at all. So yeah, that's something to consider when you go into it as well. You are going to see a different side of men that you wouldn't see otherwise. The other thing is, you don't know what kind of environment you're walking into. I obviously tried to monitor it the best I could by saying, like, no bikie houses, blah, blah, blah. And like, I would prefer to be booked on jobs with more girls depending on the ratio of men and stuff like that. You know, I'd have requests with that, but sometimes it would be like, oh, the other girl didn't turn up, or it was some kind of bullshit. So I struggled to make that something that I could implement into the work at all times. The bikie house one, even if they tried to book me on a job without my knowledge of that, I would have turned up and I would have left. So that was easier to monitor than, you know, the ratio of men to women at the time when I was doing it. So after going through this journey with sex work myself and my own experience, as well as talking to my friends in the sex industry, I've definitely come to the conclusion that sex work is glamorized far more than it used to be. And I think it's good and bad. The way that people are accepting it more now and they're less judgmental and, you know, that type of thing is great. I now can have a conversation publicly about it, and I would say that has a large majority to do with the way things are now. People are far more accepting. Had I decided to do this years ago, I don't think I would be able to. So I am really happy that things have moved in that direction, you know, for the sake of being able to even talk about my experience now. However, I do feel like things that I've experienced and what my friends have experienced definitely aren't talked about enough, which is the darker side of it. It can take a huge toll on your mental and obviously your physical health. And I think it's something that you need to consider. I would definitely suggest talking to other sex workers. Like, you know, not everyone's willing to talk to you about it, but ones that are open. I would talk to other waitresses and I would get a real gauge for the industry before jumping into it. Ask lots of questions, find out what agencies are better than others. Like, again, just make a really informed decision with it, because there is a dark side to it and it's not the safest line of work. It's good money, but it's not easy money as much as people immediately think that. It is a lot more hard work, you know, mentally and physically than people actually understand. It is a dangerous line of work. Some people would tell you that it isn't, but from my own experience and listening to other people's, it definitely is. So yeah, I honestly can't believe I just got all of that off of my chest. I've been so nervous about this episode and I think I'm going to freak out when I do post it. But yeah, I really hope that this could help some of you listening. If you've gone through this kind of experience yourself as well, you aren't alone, and I definitely understand. And this definitely changed me. This line of work changed me for good and for bad, but it's something I really wanted to talk about openly, and this was a big goal for me. So thank you guys so much for listening. I am so over the moon that I could finally talk about this publicly. It's been a really long time coming, and I just hope that this could help somebody in one way or another, whether, you know, you're looking into this line of work or you're doing it and you just feel really misunderstood whilst doing the job, or you just wanted to know of like other people who may have gone through the same thing as yourself, or maybe this could highlight the lack of safety within the industry for you. And I just really hope that I could have helped some of you by sharing this story. This is really therapeutic for me. Terrifying, but therapeutic to finally get it off my chest. And, you know, obviously you guys, as well as my family and friends, are all going to know about it now. So, yeah, I am proud of myself for getting through everything I have in my life, and I don't have any regrets, and I don't feel ashamed about this part of my life at all anymore. So yeah, it was the right time to share it. So thank you so much for listening. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please give it a share. You never know who might need a little emotional content in their life. For daily feel-good posts, follow @_emotional content on Instagram and TikTok. And don't forget to hit that follow button so you're notified every time a new episode drops. Your support means the absolute world to me.